U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry is in Shanghai today, invited by the Chinese Ministry of Ecology and Environment. His visit is critical for the steps needed to address climate change globally, and also for climate cooperations between China and the United States. President Joe Biden rejoined the Paris Agreement after he took office, and the world is waiting for Washington to address its plans to cut carbon emissions and reach carbon neutrality by 2050. Biden will host a virtual global climate summit on April 22nd, and Washington is expected to announce emission cuts of between 57% to 63% below 2005 levels this week. As a developing country, China is one step ahead. Beijing had earlier announced it planned to reach carbon neutrality by 2060, with peak carbon emissions by 2030. Echoing China's initiative to tackle global climate change despite America's former President Donald Trump's absence from such negotiations, about 100 countries contributing to 60% of the global economy are already participating in this carbon neutrality initiative and have set their targets. Climate change is one of the defining challenges of our time. Its impact is becoming more visible every year, not only in warmer temperature, rising sea, and melting glaciers, but also in extreme weather, wildfire, heat waves, hurricane, and droughts. Carbon dioxide is not the only cause of global warming. It is also caused by methane. But that issue might be more controllable as opposed to carbon dioxide. In the meantime, the economic consequences are significant, amounting to hundreds of billions of US dollars annually for major global economic entities. As the world's largest two carbon emitters, the US and China have to work together to facilitate change, take initiative, and reach the goal of zero carbon emissions instead of blaming each other and expecting the other side to contribute more. Carbon neutrality and peak emission goals by respective governments are only achievable with well-designed government policies as well as investments in place. According to various research, if conducted properly, investments needed to put the economy on a path to net zero emissions will also help to strengthen a nation's economy, ensure employment, and boost competitiveness in a global clean energy economy. While Kerry's meeting in China paved the way for Biden's upcoming climate summit, he is expected to raise several points, including construction of China's coal-fired power stations, a detailed emission cuts plan from the US, the two nations' contribution to developing countries on clean tech, and a carbon pricing mechanism. The reality is that from 1750, where emissions were thought to have been at its lowest point, until the end of 2018, China produced about 210.2 billion tons of CO2, while the US produced about 404 billion tons in the same period. That's almost doubled China's output and puts the growth of the world's most developed economic entity at the cost of the global environment. One of the most depressing features of discussions about global warming is the tendencies for it to take place in a fantasy land of the politically impossible. As a developing country with the world's largest population, China has responsibly set its carbon emission control targets with a rational consensus to reach such sustainable goals. Hopefully, the US can also achieve bipartisan consensus on the climate issue while respecting China and other countries. Allegations are not constructive to build common ground for future collaborations.